I am a 35-year-old female and my story takes place when I was 15, but it feels like yesterday. It was the day that would change my innocent youth forever. I am from a little village in Ireland with a population of a few hundred. The nearest town is about 10 miles away. Growing up in rural Ireland was very idealistic. Summers were spent playing football with neighbors or going to the lake swimming till the sun went down. I was lucky that even though the population is small and the houses are far apart, my best friend's house was only down the road. So during those summer months, Mary and I were inseparable. My friend and I grew up with lots of brothers and sisters in a safe village. We were given a lot of freedom, and sometimes we were gone all day and only came back before dark. As it was the mid-90s, we had no mobile phones, but our mums knew we would be okay and look out for each other. One thing we liked to do during these summers, besides going to the lake and hanging out at each other's houses, was to go to town and look around the shops. The easiest way to get to town was to hitchhike as there were no buses. Here in Ireland, we call it thumbing. Hardly anyone won hitches now because most households have 2 cars and parents are a lot more protective, but back in the 80s and 90s, it was very common. Our parents were okay with it, but there were certain rules we had to follow. I am not entirely sure who came up with the rules, but I assume our parents did. Rule number 1. Never hitch alone, you must thumb with at least 1 or 2 friends. Number 2. Never take a lift if there are 2 or more men in the car, but 2 or more women is fine. Number 3. Never take a lift from someone in a van. There could be more guys hiding in the back. Or worse, ropes, blindfolds, etc. Number 4. This was the most important rule. When a car stops to pick you up, always ask the driver where they are going first. If you tell them where you are going first, they could pretend they are going to the same place to lure you in. We were innocent but had common sense, so we followed the rules down to a T. At least we tried to. My friend Mary and I used to hitch once a week during the summer. We would go to a town with a population of a few thousand and look around the shops, eat ice cream, and hang out. When we got a ride, we had to make small talk with the driver, and as 2 shy 15-year-olds, this bit sucked the most. To make it fair, we took turns sitting in the front and did most of the talking. One day we spent a few hours in town. It was pretty uneventful, so we decided to thumb back. At around 3 in the afternoon, we went to the usually spot to hitch from, just on the outskirts of the town. We were only waiting about 5 minutes when a white car pulled up. Before we could ask where he was going, he asked us first. My friend told him, and he said he was passing through our village on the way to another one. Rule number 4 broken, but he seemed nice enough and we just wanted to go home. It was my turn to sit in the front. The driver introduced himself as John, a farmer, and was super friendly. He was dressed in a worn t-shirt with holes in it. He had tattered pants and smelled of cow shit. The car was full of bits of straw and was old and battered like the driver. He was about 60, had no wedding ring on. Don't ask me why, but I always notice these things. About halfway between the town and our home village, he asked if we heard a noise. No, we replied. There it is again. Sounds like a banging noise, he said. I didn't hear anything, so just sat there quietly. I think it might be the exhaust pipe, he said. I'll have to pull in and have a look. He pulled up on a busy road and went out to take a look. I didn't hear anything, said Mary. He seems like a weirdo, I said. Call it intuition, but even though he was super friendly and chatty, I got a bad feeling from him. Next thing, he comes back to the driver's side and tells us that the exhaust is hanging down and was hitting off the road. He needs us to help him tie it up. It was then I noticed he had string holding up his pants instead of a belt. I thought this was odd. Anyway, he got some string of the boot, same color string as his belt, and we both got out of the car. Although I got a bad vibe from him, I didn't feel scared at this stage. We were on a busy road and it was only about 3:30 in the afternoon, so we both got out of the car. He showed us the exhaust pipe hanging down and used a rag to hold it up because it was hot. My friend Mary took over holding it up while he secured it with string. They were both kneeling while I just stood back and watched. It was then I noticed his fly was open and I could see his privates. He was clearly not wearing any underwear. He didn't even have a belt on, so I guess I wasn't surprised. In my head, I thought, oh fuck, what is going on? Oh shit, but I said nothing. I just stood there in shock. Mary hadn't noticed at this stage and just continued to hold the pipe. When John was standing up, he noticed his fly was open and acted all shocked. Oh girls, I am so sorry and embarrassed. I only have a safety pin holding the fly together, and it must have come off. Please forgive me, and get back in the car. Mary was stunned because she got a close-up of his privates, which left me to do the talking. I told him it was okay and that it was an accident, so we got back in the car. He fastened the safety pin even though I didn't see him look for it. All was hidden again. Back in the car, the atmosphere was very different. We both felt mortified and he kept apologizing over and over. I looked out the passenger window and repeated, it's okay, then he said something that turned my stomach. Well, girls, ye are taking it very well. If I didn't know any better, I'd swear you liked it. Then he nudged me in the arm with his arm, like you would do a friend. I looked at him through the corner of my eye, my face still facing the window, when I noticed his fly was undone again and he was exposed yet again. He must have noticed me looking because he said, oh, sorry, the safety pin keeps opening. Just don't look fine by me, I thought, but I said okay and continued to look out the window. He kept nudging me and saying, don't be looking, giggling at the same time. He was doing this in a playful way, like this was a joke. Mary started giggling too, because when she is nervous, she laughs. I knew it wasn't her fault, but I was getting angry at this stage. He wouldn't stop telling me to stop looking. Then he said, your friend is laughing. She must be enjoying the view. This made her laugh even harder. Now remember, we are both polite 15-year-olds that always respect our elders and are a little shy, so I would never speak up to an adult. The nudging in my arm and my friend laughing was all getting too much. He asked if it was the first cock I had seen and told me once again to stop looking. I was turned facing the passenger window so much so that I had my back to him. There is no way I could be looking. I lost my temper. I shouted at the top of my voice, I'm not fucking looking. Mary, shut up, fucking laughing. Silence followed. He said sorry, he was only joking, and I didn't need to be so serious. I said nothing and sat there red with temper. I should have told him to let us out. I should have told him to cover himself up with the dirty old perv, but I was in shock too, and part of me wanted to believe it was all an innocent mistake. We finally arrived at our tiny, safe little village. We got out, and he said again that he was sorry about the whole thing. My friend got her voice back and assured him it was okay. I said it was all okay and not to worry about it. I said, thanks for the lift. What he said back sickened me. He looked me up and down with this creepy smile and said, girlies, thanks for everything, and drove off. We were left speechless. We sat down on a nearby bench to process all of this before going home. We made a deal we wouldn't tell our parents, or they'd never let us hitchhike again. My friend got back her voice and repeated pervert, sicko, smelly bastard. He had this planned the whole time over and over. About 5 minutes after sitting down on the bench, who drives by going the direction we just came from, only pervert Farmer John, waving and smiling while we sat stunned. He had beeped to catch our attention. So much for passing through our village. A few months later, and the ordeal went to the back of my mind. Occasionally we would talk about Farmer John, but we made jokes about it, and we told some of our friends about what happened. One day, I told a friend of mine named Brid, a cousin of hers, had told her a very similar story. The cousin lived in another village about 20 miles the other direction from town. She was a few years older than us. While hitchhiking home one day, the same thing happened to her and her friend, the exhaust, the safety pin, and the undone fly. It was no accident, and my worst fears were confirmed, so, to the man that smells like cow shit, has worn clothes and uses string to hold up his pants, and to the man who gets off on exposing himself to young girls, let's not meet again. I was on a hitchhiking adventure from British Columbia, Canada, to Antigua, Guatemala in September of 2019. This post is taken from the notes in my journal, which I wrote as soon as I could after this insane experience. If you've ever hitchhiked before, You know how amazing it is, and how many cool people you can meet. Out of thousands of rides across 40 countries, I've only had 2 scary or dangerous encounters. This was my second one. I was taking a break from traveling to find weed trim work in California's Nevada City, a beautiful little town with a very interesting crowd, but got stuck a few towns over for not getting a ride all day. I ended up sleeping a night at the Love's gas station, which I had done plenty of times before. I've slept in worse places. At least I love having a bathroom. In the morning, I was a little more desperate to accept rides because no one was stopping, and it had already been a whole day. I just wanted to get out of there. A pickup truck is speeding past me and slams the brakes ahead, then slowly backs up. Inside is a man and a woman in their late 50s, and he says in a husky voice, "Where you headed, boy?" "Nevada City. Any distance helps," I replied. "We'll get in," he said. "We're going to Yuba." They seemed normal enough, even without most of their teeth and hair, so I jumped in. It all happened in rapid succession. 1, I toss my bag in the back and jump in. 2, I shut the door. 3, I notice a pile of guns and bullets on the floor. 4, before I have time to rethink my decision, we speed off. So, as I'm trying to assess whether or not I'm in danger, they start telling me how this guy just got out of jail for aggravated assault. How he, quote, beat that motherfucker so bad he can't think straight no more. And they both laugh. She's holding his seatbelt over his chest. They both smell like shit, and they start asking how much money I have. I think, yep, I'm not safe here. After hitchhiking all this way, I don't look particularly wealthy. I'm filthy. I need a shower. I look no different than the stereotypical homeless guy. So I try to seem more poor than I am, and more tough than I am too. I say I'm broke as fuck, man. That's why I'm going to the city. I'm hoping to make some cash trimming. The man looks me in the eye. "Well, you'll find it all right. You'll find it good. Don't be afraid to do no dirty work. If people try, and they'll try, to fuck you, you fuck them first. You get what I'm saying? Put your eyes on the damn road. Jesus Christ." The woman points forward, and he swerves back to the right lane. He asks me if I smoke, and knowing that California has legalized weed, I put 2 and 2 together. He's offering me a joint. So I say, "Yeah, I smoke." With a wild look in his eyes, he exclaims, "Great." And we turn off the highway and start down a dirt road. I'm more than worried, and I look behind us. In the back of the truck is my bag, as well as a chainsaw, a pickaxe, and a plastic tarp over something. That didn't help my anxiety. Finally, we stop in front of a clearing. The woman takes out, not a joint, but a meth pipe. It's the first time I've seen a meth pipe, and a lot of things start to make sense. While he lights up and exhales into the car, I've never seen smoke so white. I roll the window down as fast as possible, because I don't want to smoke that shit. The woman takes some as well, and they tell me how they were going to collect money that a woman owes them. That damn bitch is gonna pay today one way or another. Damn straight. She better have the money. I'm gonna grab her and say, "Where's my money, bitch?" Oh, she'll have it all right. She'll have it or else. Say, "Son, you ever steal something? Because we could make $20,000 today if you're interested." I don't know exactly how to answer this guy, and he repeats $20,000 today. "Here, smoke some of this," and hands me the pipe. "Nothing like meth, ain't that right?" I gently reject it and say that meth's not really my thing, which he surprisingly takes well and smokes some more before putting it away and driving off back towards the highway. His driving is terrible. Constant swerving, speeding, hitting brakes abruptly, and starts trying to convince me to help them steal marijuana plants. "You'll hold my gun, and I'll drill the hole, and I'll keep a lookout. Yeah, baby girl will keep a look. Now you gotta be careful if you hear the dogs, because them sons of bitches are nasty, nasty. See this bite?" And he reveals what looks like a terrible scar on his arm. I didn't really know how to get out of the situation, so I sounded as confident as possible and said that I was meeting a friend to look for work together and they would be expecting me today. We neared the end of Yuba City where they pulled over to the side. Well, it's your funeral. You don't want to eat? Fine by me. But if you ever want that cash, you call me. He hands me his number. Hell no, I think. Thanks, I will quickly retrieving my bag, smiling nervously. The woman says with a wave, take care now. God bless. And they speed off. I'm standing on the side of the road, thinking, what the hell was that? Happy to be out of that car. Meth heads 1 and 2, thanks for the offer to steal marijuana plants, but let's never, ever meet again. This story took place when I was 23 years old, close to 10 years ago. I was living in upstate New York in a very rural area with my ex-boyfriend and his family. He and I used to argue quite a bit. One morning, before he went to work, he and I got into a very heated argument. He was 20 years my senior, but during this particular fight, he acted majorly juvenile. He jumped out of bed, flipped me the bird, and yelled, "If you don't like it so much, then why don't you go back to the fucking Bronx?" That was all the prompting I needed. I threw on my Uggs and my winter jacket, grabbed my cigarettes, and flew out of the house. I am unfortunately an impulsive ass and didn't think to grab my cell phone before I stormed out. I didn't drive, so my only option was to walk. I don't think at the time that I intended to walk back to the Bronx, as I was a 3-hour car ride upstate, but I just needed to go for an angry, dramatic walk. I realized once I got to this road at the entrance of the trailer park that I had no idea where anything really was around me, as I had only lived there a few months at that point, and we really didn't go out a lot. I banked left and just walked and walked where I knew civilization was. I found myself walking alongside a very busy stretch of road with 18-wheelers flying by, spraying me with slushy snow and soaking my shoes. I saw my then-boyfriend driving by on his way to work, and he sped up as he drove past me, evidently still angry about our fight. I thought for sure he was going to turn around at some point, but he never came back. I pressed on, deciding instead to try to walk to my best friend's mother's house, which I knew to be in the same town. It started to snow, and I was losing momentum. I passed by a VFW where a nondescript pickup truck was parked in the driveway. It wasn't until I had passed it that I even realized the driver was in the front seat. He called out to me, "Hey, honey, do you need help?" My stomach churned, realizing I would have to accept this stranger's offer. I approached his truck slowly and tried to weigh out my options. He was a clean-cut, seemingly normal older white guy, gray hair, greenish-blue eyes, just average. I blurted out, "Are you a good guy or a bad guy?" and cringed at myself for asking such a dumb question. He answered, "I'm a good guy. I wouldn't tell you if I was a bad guy." I ignored the bells going off in my head and got in the front seat with him. As we drove, I realized I had no clue where my friend's mom actually lived. I knew the name of the road she lived on, but it spanned a good distance, so it wasn't very helpful in terms of finding my destination. I asked to borrow his cell phone so I could try calling my best friend to ask her where the fuck I was going. I called her 3 times and she didn't answer because she didn't recognize the number. I started to feel inexplicably hopeless. After a few minutes, he asked me where I was from and why I was out in the middle of nowhere in the snow wearing pajamas. I explained I was originally from the Bronx and that I had gotten into a fight with my boyfriend. He paused and said, "Hey, you wouldn't be interested in making a little money, would ya?" I chuckled nervously and said, "Oh, no, thanks though." He responded, "Well, I just figured since you said you were from the Bronx," and trailed off. Realizing at that point that I was almost definitely in deep shit, I muttered, "Oh, sure, sure." He eyed me up and down and laughed to himself before sneering. "Sure, sure," she says. I started to panic big time, but knew I couldn't show my fear. I scoured the scenery for a pillowy snowbank that I could land in if I leapt out of the truck to no avail. The houses were so few and far in between, I became certain this would be how I met my demise. I'll never know why, but it was at this point that he decided to ask me who I was going to see. I quickly blurted out my best friend's mom's name and her husband's name. He instantly perked up and explained that he knew the husband and how they used to snowmobile together 20 years ago. I felt the greatest wave of relief when he explained that he knew exactly where his old buddy lived. When we finally pulled up to that big yellow house, it was like arriving to the promised land. I sheepishly asked his name, Steve, he said, then asked mine. I gave him a fake name, spat out a bullshit thank you, and ran as fast as I could from his truck to the porch. I crashed through the front door and locked it behind me. I immediately started crying and running through the house trying to find my friend's mom. I had awoken her from a sound sleep, but she didn't say a word about it upon seeing how shaken up I was. Once I knew I was safe with her, I explained everything. The fight, the fleeing, the weird guy and his sexual proposition, and she listened, horrified and curious at the same time. She made me promise to never do anything so reckless again, and that if I needed her to call her. She told me she would ask her husband when he got home about this Steve guy and find out more about him. I returned to my boyfriend's later that same day and got really stoned to try to forget about the events of that morning. The following day, my friend's mom called me to tell me that Steve was a dangerous person who her husband had cut off communication with years ago. The last he had heard about Steve was that he had been arrested for sexual assault. She then went on to point out how incredibly easy it would have been for him to hurt me and leave me just about anywhere on some lonely stretch of road, and no one would even know where to look for me. Not to mention I might not have even been found until the snow thawed out. So Steve, you major fucking creep, let's never meet again. Edit. Upon sharing this post with the best friend of mine mentioned in this story, she reminded me that I left out a super unsettling detail. When her mom called, she was able to tell me Steve's last name. One of the first results on Google with his name, plus the town's name, brought me straight to a registered sex offender website with a mugshot of him. His eyes looked cold and empty, and I realized with him being on probation at that time, he would have been especially eager to not have me get him in any further trouble with the law. Her mom said it best when she told me that I must have some serious guardian angels looking out for me,